of Trade Reboot Global Commodities Conference 2020. One of the subject matters for the panel discussion was market trends in minerals and ore. We are now joined by Mr. Shankhdeep Mukherjee, team leader with CRU, a company which is into the metals and mining research since the last 50 years. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, Mr. Shankhdeep.
Thank you for having me, Mukherjee.
So, what were the important outcomes of the panel discussion?
So I felt it was a very engaging and very well moderated panel discussion by Mr. Chandekar ji. And I think one of the key things which I took away from the discussion is that the long-term growth prospects for the country, as specifically as far as the metals industry is concerned, remains quite strong. And however, there are certain concerns regarding how the short-term recovery is expected to look like. Uh, we are definitely seeing significant recovery in automotive production, significant recovery in infrastructure facility production. Uh, but there is a little bit of concern on whether this is just pent-up demand or people fulfilling orders which they were not able to fulfill earlier, or people just replenishing their stocks, or there is actual end-use demand which is getting flowing through the value chain. So that was something very critical to take away with this, that yes, and I think this is what our honorable prime minister also said in his very recent presentation, that the lockdown might be over but the risks from COVID-19 are still not gone. So we do need to be on the watch out to see on how long this recovery is actually sustaining.
So, over the course of next year or two, any specific metal or anything specific in the mining sector that you would believe has a stronger potential to grow?
Right. So I think to answer this question, we need to take a bit step back and look at the various recessions that has actually happened in the past 100 years or so. And that is where this particular recession actually stands out, because this particular recession is triggered by a health crisis and not by a financial crisis, which was
Yes.
unlike the previous recessions.
Yes.
And that is why most of the end use sectors like manufacturing, construction, they will actually come recover much faster compared to the previous recession. And that is something which we have already seen happening. The
Yes.
key outlier, however, is going to be the automotive sector. We were already in a recession or a kind of a slowdown in the automotive sector in 2019, and that had got nothing to do with COVID. It had got to do with everything to do with the emissions related regulations that is coming in,
Yes.
and that is what is happening in globally also, with movement towards electric vehicles as and movement away from fossil fuels. And that is where the end use or the specific metals actually will have different factors. So aluminium is quite a lot dependent. Almost 25% of aluminium, global aluminium demand, is from the transport sector, whereas copper, if you look at, is not so much from the transport sector. Steel is also roughly 10 to 15% from the transport sector. So this is the precisely the reason why we think that as far as the specific industry and various metals are concerned, copper is something which will be recovering much faster, because the other industries like manufacturing end use, construction end use, they will be recovering faster.
So, you're saying copper and steel perhaps will do better than aluminium?
Copper and steel perhaps will do better than aluminium. Also, there are many things. One major thing which is happening in aluminium is there are many anti-dumping duties on China, which completely changes the trade flow for aluminium market globally, which is not such a case for the other industries.
But then, specifically for the entire gamut of minerals and ore, how do you see role of technology? We hear about emerging technologies like blockchain, AI, data analytics. How do you see application of them in the mineral and ore sector?
I think a lot of that has already been happening in the Indian context as well. If I look at only the Indian context, I mean, even artificial intelligence is something which has been there or started in, say, big mines of Australia. Self-driving trucks is something which you would have seen over there. In India also, we are now doing remote surveillance using drones, which is also a new technology which is getting used. Earlier, it used to be very difficult to survey some remote parts of the country because of maybe local issues or some insurgency issues. Surveillance of the geometric or the ores in country would not have been possible, but we are overcoming that because with this technology. And so that definitely is taking up, but it definitely, there is a lot more way to go in India on that front.
So, Mr. Shankdeep, how do you see the initiative of Trade Reboot, where they've created a global blockchain platform? And the idea is that the stakeholders in the commodities trade can leverage the benefit of technology.
Yeah, I think technology, I mean, Industry 4.0 is obviously a very big thing. It's no longer a buzzword. It is getting integrated in all parts of all aspects of manufacturing, all aspects of production. So I think that talking about technology in a forum where the metals and mining industry participants are also there is something quite yeah, noteworthy.
So, one last question. We've all seen all these years physical exhibitions, stalls. How do you see this 3 day virtual conference where nearly 3,000 participants were participating with all the enthusiasm, asking questions? And in the panel discussion, we saw nearly 60 international speakers.
So I think the point over there, the question becomes, why didn't we do everybody? Why didn't we do this before? Why did it need a pandemic situation for us to, come and decide, let's adopt technology even for conferences and do a virtual conference as well? And that is something which even in our organization, which we have adopted. And very recently, we conducted a conference, which used to be a physical conference until last year, and we had double the turnout this year when we went to a all-out virtual conference over here. So
So, one last question. What is CRU up to? Because it's a very eminent metals and mining research company in existence for almost 5 decades. What are the critical research areas or focus areas for CRU in coming years?
So one of the things which we are definitely seeing, and this was coming for some time, when COVID-19 perhaps has accelerated this, is the adoption of ESG, and specifically the thinking around how emission norms are going to change. So in Europe, and metals and mining participants who trade into Europe would be aware of this, that there are talks of border trade taxations to account for the carbon taxation over there. So that is something which you are looking for, looking working towards, and we are definitely coming up with emission dashboards on frequent basis to find out that asset which is today might be very cost effective might become uncost effective, or might even have to shut down production if carbon taxation becomes a reality.
I think that's a very important point that asset has to be factored in with the carbon emissions as well. And then only we can come to the conclusion whether it is a productive asset or not. And that's a brilliant area for research. Planet Earth needs that. Perhaps that's one of the other learning lessons COVID-19 has pushed apart from digital technology. Mr. Shankdeep, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Amej.
Thank you.